All right, well, I will get us started. Hi, everyone. Welcome. My name is Luis Montes. I am an outreach specialist with Ascent, supporting Monterey County with their community climate action and adaptation plan. Welcome, everyone, to our community workshop. Before I get started, we do have Spanish interpretation provided during this workshop, so I will hand it off to Frida, our interpreter for this workshop.
Thank you, Luis. Good afternoon and welcome to this community forum. Muy buenas tardes y bienvenidos a este foro comunitario. I'll give this message both in English and in Spanish. Daré este mensaje tanto en inglés como en español. In order to provide language access, this meeting will have simultaneous bidirectional interpretation into English and Spanish. If you're bilingual, you don't have to click anything. But if you're not bilingual and you're using your laptop, locate the icon shaped like a globe at the bottom of your screen, click on Language Interpretation, and then select English. If you're using your phone or an iPad, then locate the three-dot menu in one of the corners of your screen, click on Language Interpretation, and then select English. When you speak, do so at a moderate pace because the interpreters are going to be simultaneously interpreting everything you say. And remember, in order to have a successful bidirectional dialogue, everyone needs to enable the interpretation, including our English speakers. A efecto de proporcionar acceso lingüístico, contaremos con interpretación simultánea bidireccional al inglés y al español. Si usted es bilingüe, no tiene que presionar nada, pero si usted no es bilingüe y está en su computadora, busca el icono en forma de globo en la parte inferior de su pantalla, haga clic en Interpretación de idiomas y después seleccione Español o Spanish. Si está en su iPad o su teléfono, entonces busca el menú de 3 puntos o que dice More en una de las esquinas de la pantalla, haga clic en Interpretación de idiomas y después seleccione Español o Spanish y después Aceptar, Finalizar o Done. Cuando hable, hágalo en español y las intérpretes estarán simultáneamente interpretando todo lo que usted diga. Gracias. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Frida. Now, before we get started, I do want to go over just some Zoom functions just to make sure we are all familiar and on the same page. So first up is the mute and unmute button at the bottom left of your screen. This is, please stay on mute unless you are invited to speak or if you raise your hand. There's the start video and stop video, which turns your camera on and off. There's the chat function. Opens, so you can open and close the chat box. You are welcome to leave questions, comments throughout the meeting, and we will ensure that we flag those questions or include those comments at in our notes. There are also reactions, so if you want to use a nonverbal reaction, feel free to do that. We ask that you do use the raised hand function to notify us when you'd like to be called on to speak. And use reactions to provide reactions to what someone else is saying. We will have questions towards the end of the presentation where we will make sure we address any questions or concerns that come up. And then, of course, if you need to leave the meeting, click to leave the meeting, click the leave end button below, and that will allow you to end the meeting. So with that, I will hand it over to Cora.
Thanks, Luis. Hi, everyone. My name is Cora Pancharad. I am the Sustainability Program Manager for the County of Monterey. And just to give a brief overview of our agenda for this meeting is we will have an overview of the projects before getting into Monterey County's climate challenge and discussing the 3 big opportunities that we see for mitigation that we would like to get some feedback on and discuss with you as a group. We will have an opportunity for questions at the end of that section. So I ask that you bear with us for now, and I'm going to be explaining a lot of things on these slides, and we will hold off on questions until then. And once we get to that point, things will get a little bit more interactive once we have the 3 big opportunities, and we'll have some polls that you can participate in as well. After that, we'll have our breakout group discussions, and then we will discuss our climate action simulator that we have to work on, and then we'll get into next steps. So just to start us off, we ask that in the chat, you share your name, where you live in the county, or if there's an organization that you're affiliated with, and your favorite place in the County of Monterey. That way we can just get to know who's in the chat a bit better. And I think we can hop over to the next slide too while people are doing that, Hannah. So again, I am the Sustainability Program Manager, and we are joined by Frida Bloom, who is our Spanish interpreter. We also have Delia, who is our other Spanish interpreter providing backup, and we have quite a few folks from Ascent who are supporting this meeting. So thank you for the team who's running this and everyone for joining us today. So now for an overview of the project, we'll start by going over some key terms that we'll be discussing here tonight. So the first is greenhouse gases that we will discuss. So these are just gases that trap heat in the atmosphere and contribute to climate change, which are the long-term shifts in temperature and weather patterns driven by these greenhouse gas emissions, which are primarily produced from the burning of fossil fuels and also other sources. And the definition of sustainability that we work with at the Sustainability Program is the ability to meet the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. So as we are discussing strategies, this is an opportunity where if we see something that's not working out for our current needs, then we want to be able to address that as a community and improve it so that it also meets the needs of future generations while tackling this whole greenhouse gas issue as well. And the next term is resilience. So this is our capacity for individuals, communities, organizations, institutions, and businesses to survive, adapt, and thrive in the face of the stresses and shocks that will be happening as climate change continues to be felt across our communities. And climate adaptation is the work that we can do to address these impacts proactively. And mitigation is going to be our ability to reduce these greenhouse gas emissions and cut off that problem that is contributing to the changing climate. And that's what brings us to our climate action and adaptation plan. So this plan will align the county with statewide greenhouse gas reduction targets. It will integrate these resilience and adaptation strategies as well as our mitigation strategies. It will engage with the community and empower the community to make these changes. The plan will also connect with the existing and developing sustainability efforts into one cohesive plan. And it will communicate these climate challenges and opportunities in one document that can really focus on the prioritization and implementation of measures that are needed and valued by the community. And this next graphic just shows this dual aspect of what the mitigation and adaptation elements of the plan are trying to accomplish. So as emissions go into the atmosphere on the left side, and we can go ahead and switch to the next slide for our Spanish audience, we need to be able to mitigate those gases as they flow into the atmosphere and cut them off at the source and adapt how we do certain aspects of our behavior. And then we also need to be able to adapt to the impacts that we know are already happening with increased heat and severe weather patterns and those kinds of things that we know are coming and that we can prepare for. So this project has been a long time coming. It started in May of 2021, and we are now in the strategy development and prioritization right before we draft the plan. The goal is to get this draft plan out into the public for review and comment by members of the public in early 2025. And we can hop to the next slide too. And then after we have that comment period, which will be for around 60 days, then that's when climate plan implementation would kick off in the summer of 2025, following adoption by the Board of Supervisors. And there's been a lot of outreach to date, and thanks again, everyone, for coming to this meeting that is wrapping up a lot of these efforts. There have been a total of 3 community workshops, including this one, 13 different sector and focus working group meetings, 11 public meetings at various county forums, different meetings with 18 community-based organizations. We had our prioritization activity. There is now this participatory budgeting activity, or our climate action simulator that we are going to be discussing later that goes live today. And there's also a barrier survey that is open to the public. And all of this information and more can be found on our project websites. There's the link below on the screen. And that includes all documentation to the CAP as well as all public meetings that have happened. So you can check that out if you'd like to brush up on anything. So now from the overview into the Monterey County's climate challenge. And we can go ahead and take a look at the next slide that shows our 2021 community greenhouse gas emissions. And what we see in this slide is a snapshot of what our emissions look like for the year. And as you can see, our biggest emission sources in order are transportation, and then agriculture, and then buildings, both non-residential and residential buildings. So the CAP will include strategies aimed at improving sustainability within all of these sectors, including agricultural operations. But we're really focusing this workshop on the different strategies that everyone can participate in and that every person in the community is able to shape and influence. So that brings us to our big strategies that we'll be focusing for the transportation and energy sector. We've been discussing the climate strategies with members of the ag community from the beginning and will continue to do so. But there are a lot of other regulatory pressures that the ag industry is complying with. Most notably is Ag Order 4.0 to reduce fertilizer use. And we can talk about that a little bit more, but there will be other emission sectors that will be coming from the agricultural sector that aren't included in this plan that we will be highlighting too. So here's another way of looking at our current emissions versus where we need to go to meet our statewide climate goals. So in 2030 and 2040, you can see with the dotted line here that we need pretty steep cuts across all sectors so that we're able to meet our goals and achieve carbon neutrality by 2045. And on the next slide too, we can break down the sectors that we saw on our pie chart a bit ago, which shows that for transportation, starting with the yellow on the bottom, this really does come from primarily our internal combustion engine vehicles that use gasoline and diesel. For agriculture, a lot of those emissions are coming from fertilizer application. So that really highlights the importance of Ag Order 4.0 and the other policy levers that the ag industry is working with. For buildings, which is our third highest source of emissions, most of those emissions come from gas. You can see on the right side of the screen where electricity is less than 1% of the emissions from the building sector. That's because a lot of our electricity is already pretty clean with PG&E working to meet renewable targets as well as Central Coast Community Energy working to meet their 100% renewable goal by 2030. And after that, we have solid waste and our off-road sources as well. So that's more of a breakdown, and we can briefly pause for our Spanish audience on the next slide. And that brings us to our three big opportunities that we're here to discuss tonight for building electrification, vehicle trip reduction to tackle those transportation emissions, as well as electric vehicle adoption. So again, buildings are one of our highest sources of emissions, and they account for 21% of emissions overall for the county. And this strategy for reducing these emissions primarily comes from replacing the fossil fuel powered systems that we have in our homes and in our businesses with more efficient electric alternatives. So for our gas furnaces, we want to be switching those over to more efficient heat pumps, which are between 70 and 90% more efficient than traditional gas furnaces. And the same can be said for water heaters. So heat pump water heaters are now on the market in a variety of sizes, and they are much more efficient at meeting our heating needs than traditional heating methods. And as this technology is becoming more available, part of the challenge is getting this into our homes and businesses at an affordable rate for our community. For gas stoves, there is the opportunity to switch these out for electric or induction cooktops, and this will also help us reduce emissions and move whole buildings away from the gas system. And 98% of our emissions from buildings do come from burning gas. And most of that is for sources that aren't related to cooking. It's mostly space and water heating. And for these three opportunities, what you'll see going forward is we'll discuss the climate impacts of these different strategies and sectors, but then we want to focus as well on the community benefits and different co-benefits, as we call them, from adopting these strategies or technologies. So replacing fossil fuel infrastructure in our buildings has a number of different co-benefits associated with them. The first is healthier communities. So in California, around 20% of childhood asthma diagnoses are linked to gas appliances in the home. So being able to switch those out for an electric version means that we would have fewer childhood asthma cases and healthier communities. Electric appliances also have a significantly less risk of exploding because gas, again, is a combustible fuel. So that improves home and safety, especially in times of disaster. If there's a wildfire or an earthquake, then having gas pipelines in our communities can be a really difficult thing for first responders to deal with. The pollution that comes from these appliances are not just for climate and causing climate change through their ability to trap in this heat, but they can also be quite harmful for our lungs. So being able to reduce these emissions is a benefit overall for our health. And they're also much more resilient because electricity can be repaired much faster than gas lines can be in the event of a disaster where these services are shut down. And electric appliances can coexist with batteries and home energy systems a lot better than the gas appliances can. So if the power goes out and we have a battery and electric vehicle system set up in our home with solar, then we can have a much more resilient system so that our families are less impacted by those power outages. And with the right incentives in place and programs, they can also be quite cost effective and even provide savings on energy bills for the community. So with that, we're going to start our first interactive poll.
And just to provide some instructions for those who are unfamiliar with Slido, there are a couple ways you can join. The first is by scanning that QR code with your phone. Open up your camera and scan the QR code, and it'll direct you straight to the Slido questions that we will be presenting during the presentation. You can also go to slido.com and enter 3169167, where it says to join a meeting. And you can join from your computer or device that you're using. If you are uncomfortable using Slido, you are more than welcome to use the chat to submit your answers, and we'll make sure that they get included in the summary. And with that, I'll hand it off to Hannah.
Great. So for our first question here, we would like to know what's the most important thing to you when considering switching to electric appliances for your home. And for this, we ask that you check anything that applies to you. This does not give me all of the options right on the screen here. There's several that you can scroll through. So we'll give folks just a moment to respond to this, and then we'll take a look at the results. So it looks like long-term cost savings is the top concern. It's in a neck and neck battle here with being good for the planet. Improved air quality and less risk of asthma and respiratory illnesses and symptoms are also a top concern among folks that are on this call right now. All right, we'll move to our next poll, and so please don't close your browser wherever you have it. We have a few more of these coming throughout the presentation. For our next question, we'd like to know for members of your household, what are the barriers to using electric or induction stoves? And again, you can check all that apply to you and your household. Right. Looks like initial cost is the biggest barrier so far. And a good portion of you already have an electric or an induction stove. Also seeing good number of responses on folks who rent and don't have the purchasing power for appliances, and some folks that are unsure about operating costs. Initial cost is still coming in at 59%, and I think we've got critical mass there, so we'll move on to our presentation, and back to you, Cora.
All right, thanks everyone. This feedback is really helpful to us. So our next big opportunity for emissions reductions is for transportation, which is our biggest source of emissions in the county. So first, we'll discuss vehicle trip reduction as a way to mitigate those emissions. So vehicle trip reduction is exactly what it sounds like. It's reducing the amount of time and trips that we spend in cars. So reducing reliance on vehicles by promoting alternative transportation modes and smarter urban planning is one way of reducing this trip reliance on cars. And we can also do this by empowering communities to walk, bike, or use public transit. And again, this accounts for 39% of our community emissions. So that is the largest source of emissions that we have in the county. And just like with buildings, reducing this, the miles that we spend traveling in vehicles has a host of other benefits for the community that are important for us to highlight. And the first among these is that it builds connection. So being able to move from driving a car everywhere you have to go in your own personal vehicle, and being able to have the choice between other modes of transportation increases freedom for families in the county. It can also reduce time stuck in traffic, which I think we can all agree that we don't want to be spending more time in traffic. And this can increase social cohesion or really build a sense of community within the public space. Because when you are taking public transportation or walking or biking, you're able to build more relationships with community members and interacts with them on a more human scaled and personal level. The other benefit is for cost savings. So car ownership often costs an average of $12,000 annually. And this is really expensive when you look at other options that are available for us, like a monthly bus pass that costs $70 or an e-bike that costs $1,500 once. Another benefit of switching away from the single occupancy vehicle model that we have currently is that there is a huge safety benefit of being able to drive less frequently. So in 2021, the year where we have numbers for most recently, 2,370 people in the county were killed or injured in car crashes. And in that same year, of all the counties in California, Monterey County ranked the worst of all of them for crashes where the victim who was killed or injured was a pedestrian under 15 years old. So this is a really pressing safety issue that we have in the county and something that we can address holistically while we work to mitigate these greenhouse gas emissions. And I'll pass that back for another question.
Yeah, so related to this, we'd like to know for members of your household, What are the most important considerations when deciding to use public transportation or active transportation, which we would define as walking, biking, scootering, anything that requires you to not use a motor in and around Monterey County? And again, we ask that you check anything that would apply to you or your household. And if you did close your browser, it's okay. You can join the poll at any time using the QR code or going to slido.com and entering the number. I'm not sure why I'm not seeing the results coming in. It does say that it's active. I'm looking at the number of folks that have participated, but we're having a slight technical challenge here.
Yeah, my Slido says it was sent, but it's not showing results either.
Thank you for sharing that. I'm gonna try going to the next one and seeing if that, oh, okay. Well, that one seems to be active. Is this, that's okay. Well, somehow we fixed it. It looks like most folks are saying that the most important considerations for them and their households is health and exercise opportunities, avoiding parking hassles, and safety considerations like Cora was just speaking about. All right, we'd also like to know what barriers prevent you from taking transit, walking, biking, or using other non-vehicular modes to get to work, school, or run errands. And again, please check all that apply. Looks like most folks responding are finding that the service or the infrastructure is not adequate. Maybe it's infrequent buses, lack of bike lanes, insufficient crossings. For a lot of people, it's also that the distance is too far for where they're trying to get to. And the next most popular response is safety concerns. Great, thanks for participating in that. And Cora, I'll pass it back to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Hannah. And again, everyone, we will have opportunities to discuss these in a bit more detail later on. And if you want to add anything specific into the chat, please feel free to do so. So our next opportunity is for electric vehicle adoption. So for the trips that we can't reduce, adopting electric vehicles is a really crucial way to continue to have that mobility choice for community members and also reduce those greenhouse gas emissions. So our primary strategy for that is to make EVs more accessible than fossil fuel cars. And accelerating this transition is really key so that we can prepare for a future where there are fewer internal combustion engine vehicles on the road and that we have increased access to charging stations in public, especially near multifamily housing and in under-resourced communities. We'd also want to really prioritize having those charging stations available where people are able to take a road trip, get off the highway and charge up reliably without having to worry about that concern. And again, there are quite a few benefits that are associated with owning an electric vehicle compared to a car with an internal combustion engine. So the first is cost savings. EV owners save around $6,000 to $10,000 over the vehicle's lifetime compared to a gas-powered car. This savings often comes from the fueling costs because it is around 60% less to fuel an EV with electricity. There's also a reduced maintenance cost and repair cost for electric vehicles, because there are just fewer moving pieces in the engine of an electric vehicle. If you think about an internal combustion engine, that is gasoline exploding and a bunch of pieces moving around inside, and all of those have the potential to break a lot more easily than they do in a battery-powered car. EVs are also increasingly more available and convenient. Many models out on the market now have range of 250 miles or more, and this enables people to complete 92% of their charging at home and also be able to go where they need to go on one battery charge without having to think too much about range anxiety. And when we think about reducing vehicle use and EV adoption, there is a lot of overlap there. So our primary benefits that we were discussing for reducing vehicle use in general is that active, healthy lifestyle benefits, more walkable and pleasant communities, reducing road maintenance by not having as much cars or heavy vehicles on the road, and then reducing traffic congestion that overall works with increased air quality and public health and noise pollution to make our communities more pleasant to live in. EV adoption similarly helps reduce those transportation costs and dependence on fossil fuels. And there are many incentives available to further decrease costs for electric vehicles. You're able to better integrate that into home energy kits. There are bi-directional chargers that are available on the market so that if you have a solar system, you're able to use your car as a battery and maintain a more resilient home during those public power safety shutoffs. And we have reduced operation and maintenance costs, and we're able to use clean energy with an EV.
Great. Well, we have our last two polls here. So in relation to electric vehicles, we'd like to know for members of your household, what are the most important considerations to driving an electric vehicle? And again, you can check all that apply.
Yeah, and the cost savings really, really are nice. I switched to a plug-in hybrid electric vehicle. I live in Monterey and work in Salinas often, and I only have to buy gas when I take a road trip, and that really adds up over a couple months.
I apologize for interrupting. Silo is only allowing me to check one answer on this one.
Is anyone else having that issue?
You know, it may have been set on, it may not be on select all at the moment.
Okay. All right, so we are learning what is the most important, not some of the most important. So it looks like of those who have responded, fuel savings and less maintenance cost are the most important to consider for driving an electric vehicle, followed by the fact that it's good for the planet. All right, and their last poll for you is about the barriers. What are the barriers for members of your household to driving an electric vehicle? And hopefully you are able to check all that apply in this instance.
No, it's only.
No. All right, well, we'll ask you to select what is the biggest barrier to driving an electric vehicle for your household. It's like upfront cost is the biggest barrier to folks, followed by access to charging at home. A significant number of folks here don't have barriers and perhaps already drive electric vehicles. And towing capacity is also a barrier to being able to drive an electric vehicle.
And again, everyone, since we're having some difficulties with Slido, please feel free to add any other concerns for barriers or benefits into the chat, and we can document things the old-fashioned way.
Yes, and we will share the barrier survey at the end of this workshop that we hope you can take and give us even more information and dig a little bit deeper into, you know, these challenges that you and your household might be facing. So that's it for the Slido portion of this.
Great, and that brings us to the end of our presentation section. Thank you all for sticking with us and participating with our polls. We can now have a few minutes to do some questions and answers for me and the Ascent team. So we can open the floor. Please write your question in the chat or raise your hands. And I see
I
Michael.
think we have a fair number. I do see we have a fair number in the chat, Cora, and so I wonder if Luis, you want to read those off first.
So there are definitely like a number of questions. How do we want to go about them? Because
I think let's try to ask them in the order they were received.
okay.
And if you see any themes or can group them, then please feel free to do that.
I think the first one I'm seeing is from Janelle.
Yes, that's the one I'm looking at.
Okay.
Do
So
you want to go and read that one?
yeah, read it off. So does this data include the carbon that is sequestered from each sector?
Yes, so there will be a section in the Climate Action Plan that does address natural working lands, including sequestration. This is going to be a separate topic since we are focusing on the community strategies, primarily for building and transportation, but that is definitely something that will be addressed in the Climate Action Plan.
And then the next question from Kathy, why are oil and gas emissions not included in the inventory?
So the emissions from oil and gas are regulated outside of the county's control. And then I think, Hannah, you can address this in a bit more detail, but we have discussed oil and gas emissions in the past to provide visibility on global overall emissions for the county, but that's not something that is specifically within the jurisdiction of the county to address.
Yes, if you visit our website, we do have the final greenhouse gas inventory report available. We do estimate the greenhouse gas emissions associated with oil and gas facilities in the county. But like Cora said, we're not counting those towards the county's inventory, and that's consistent with protocols that most jurisdictions use when developing climate action plans. We're happy to follow up if there's other questions about that after this meeting.
And then another question, I heard the EV battery only lasts 150,000 miles, then it's $15,000 to replace just the battery. Is this true?
So I know that EVs can last quite a bit longer than that. Like anything, there are warranties that are available for the battery when you buy an electric vehicle, and I'm not too familiar with this issue, but I know that there are options for replacing batteries, and EVs do last for quite a long time.
Scrolling through the comments. Is car insurance higher in electrical cars?
Not to my knowledge. I don't know if anyone from the Ascent team has insight on that. I know car insurance is getting more expensive as we have more gadgets and technology in our cars, but I haven't heard anything specifically driving up the cost of EV insurance.
No, I've not heard of that, those being linked before.
I can say that my e-bike insurance is about $30 a month, and that's a lot cheaper than a car.
It looks like we have an agriculture related question. What are the barriers to reducing use of fertilizers? And this might just be kind of more open-ended, I'm not sure.
So I know that we've been in discussion with some ag stakeholders, and I know that there are a few on the line, but I know that fertilizer use is something that is important for crop yields in the county, and that they are going to be complying with Ag Order 4.0 and trying to reduce fertilizer use, but I don't want to speak too much on that since that's a bit out of my purview.
And then we have from Pam, if we convert so much to electric, stoves, heating system, cars, etc., will there be sufficient electric production to support the demand?
So PG&E is our utility who is responsible for working with the California Public Utilities Commission, and they do a lot of studies to project future electricity demands. And that is part of their programming is to make that prediction, including looking at different plans like this one and being able to take stock of where EVs and other electrification initiatives are going to be happening and then provide for the capacity on the grid. Whether that's upgrades or new generation or interconnection facilities, that is something that the state utility network is taking into account.
And then this one's from Eric, has encouraging remote hybrid work where possible been discussed as a proposal for reducing vehicle miles traveled?
That has been, and this brings us a little bit to our municipal climate action plan. So that is one of the ways that the county can lead the way as the county's largest employer, is being able to have policies around remote work and commuting to start to encourage some of these trip reduction opportunities. And hopefully this can spread more towards the community. And if there are other needs regarding remote work that pop up, then that's something that we'd like to address too.
It looks like we're continuing to get some questions. Is sequestration being considered to balance the ag emissions, especially in livestock?
Yes. So, like we said earlier, sequestration will be taken into account. It's a little bit different. So, we still have to look at the emissions as they are coming up, separate from the sequestration work that's happening. And that's partly because there is sequestration that occurs naturally in our forest and also in our working lands. And that is different from a sequestration program where we were able to do a specific list of practices that shows any additional amounts of sequestration. So there will be a chapter in the Climate Action Plan addressing that. And Ascent is also the team that worked on a regional sequestration plan recently for the Association of Monterey Bay Area Governments. So we are lucky to be working with the experts on that subject in the county. So that will be addressed in the plan.
And then we have two questions about the greenhouse gas inventory. The first one is, how are these emission numbers calculated and measured? And then, are we still taking comments and questions on the GHG inventory?
Sure. So the greenhouse gas inventory comes from a variety of different sources. I think, Hannah, you can probably give a better description of that than I can, so I'll pass it over to you in a second. But all of that is available on our project website on the Conveo link that was shared earlier. So you can check out the actual sources in that document there.
Yeah, essentially, we look at activity data that is associated with different types of actions that happen within the county. So that might be the electricity consumed by buildings, both homes and commercial buildings. It's looking at the number of vehicle trips that are taken within the county and a whole host of other activities, and then multiplying those by what we call emissions factors. So at a on a per activity level basis, how much might that emit in terms of greenhouse gases. All of the details of those calculations are available in the final greenhouse gas inventory report. That is available as of October. It is on the project website. We'll be posting the link several times in the chat tonight. You're welcome to take a look at it. At this point, we are not anticipating additional changes to this document. This has been a process that has been updated 5 times over the past 3 years. So if there are additional questions or comments on it, we would request that those are received when the entire climate action plan is released publicly in early 2025.
And then we have an equity, oops, sorry.
Also, I do want to say that I have seen Michael's hand up for quite a while, so we should address our raised hand questions too. Michael, go ahead.
Oh, thank you. Hello, my name is Michael Mendoza, and I'm here with the Center for Community Advocacy. One thing, even for myself and what I see a lot here in East Salinas, is the age of homes, right? A lot of homes were built maybe about like the 1940s. There's also a couple that are built earlier than that. A lot of homes here have not been upgraded electrically, basically to county and insurance standards, right? So I don't know if there's any type of program out there being produced by the state or by the county, because I can speak for myself when I say this. As much as I want to go ahead and like buy an induction stove, maybe go forward with an electrical vehicle, is like the wiring in my home, which was built in 1942, going to be compatible with my energy needs? And am I risking like, electrical fires at that point? And then also to speak on behalf of our constituency, do you know of any programs that are out there to provide people with energy saving programs, like say for like new windows, new doors and things like that to keep their emissions lower?
Thanks. That's a really good point. So old homes are a concern for a number of reasons. And there are programs that are coming down the pipeline locally that I've heard where we could be investigating direct install programs or potentially offering incentives and rebates for these electrical upgrades and weatherization directly for residents. Another thing to think about, you mentioned homes that were built in the 40s, is that the first energy code came out in 1973. So if your home was built before then, your insulation is probably non-existent. So that means that residents in those homes have higher energy bills. So being able to have a program that addresses these efficiency needs, installs cleaner, healthier appliances, and also reduces the cost burden on these families is definitely something we want to look at as part of this plan. And I think maybe our last raise hand question, and then we can skip into our breakout rooms. Thank you, everyone, for this discussion.
Oh, I just this is Laura Solorio from Protect Monterey County, and I just wanted to clarify that while it was true in the past, after Measure Z and the Supreme Court decision, that local jurisdictions could not regulate oil and gas, in September of this year, the governor signed AB 3233, which allows local jurisdictions local regulations over oil and gas. And so I would really encourage the board and this group to address how we measure those greenhouse gases. It has been as high as 3.3 million metric tons of greenhouse gases per year. So I think that would be a really important area to look at. And we can do it legally. Thank you.
Thanks for bringing that up. I think if that is feedback that we take away and we see more of in the breakout room, then we can find a place for that in our climate action plan. And your short-term actions are somewhere else.
Laura?
Yeah, go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, thank you very much. Well, first I want to say that I want to thank Cora and Hannah for getting the climate action and adaptation plan back on track. And it's really exciting to see the progress you're now making. We've lost a couple of years with didn't seem to be much going on, and I'm sure there's lots of reasons for that. But now it's good to see it back on track. So that I appreciate that very much. I have a question for Cora and one for Hannah. Cora, can you tell us when you have a deadline, or when you can tell us when the draft CAP will be published? Because that's when we can really have some meaningful discussions, especially around implementation. So if you could tell us an idea of when that's going to be, and then Hannah, for you, with your experience working with other CAPs around California, with the ag community, what have you found to be the best, or the one thing that can actually be done with ag to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, that an action item that that you found that it works and is acceptable to the ag community? Thank you.
Sure. So first question about the draft plan is, like we mentioned earlier, our goal is to get the draft plan out in early 2025. So that could be sometime in January is the goal, maybe early February. The main thing that we want to do is be able to incorporate all the feedback that we're getting from these community meetings and other stakeholders and departments. And once we have that consolidated, we will be releasing it out into the public. And we want to give a 60-day comment period so that there is enough time for people, communities, businesses, and other organizations to respond.
And I'll address the question that you asked, Tom, about, what are effective agricultural strategies. And I think agriculture is so unique depending on where in the state you're looking. And so I'm not sure that I would say that there's a one size fits all solution that we've seen in any jurisdiction. In Monterey County, there, for example, aren't dairies, and we know that dairies are significant producers of methane. So that's not something that we've really talked about for Monterey County. We also know that the regional water board has Ag Order 4.0, and as you probably saw from one of the earlier slides, that's 17% of the agricultural, or excuse me, the entire greenhouse gas emissions inventory, and a significant portion of those in Monterey County. And so as we look at the forecast in terms of how that regulation might impact fertilizer emissions going forward, we see those numbers trend significantly downward just by complying with that regulation. So in many discussions with the agricultural stakeholders here in Monterey County, we've really started to focus more on kind of how can we treat the working lands as carbon sequesterers. How can we make sure that we're conserving land, protecting it, maintaining that carbon stock that's there, because it's certainly at a risk of loss from climate impacts and potentially development. So there's, again, no one size fits all. We're going to have quite a few strategies really focusing on both the natural and the working lands in the county. And so stay tuned for what that looks like in the climate action plan. All right, we're going to pass it over to Luis to walk us through what we're going to do next.
Awesome. Thank you, Hannah. So we want to continue the discussions that we're having. Definitely appreciate all the questions. But we're going to go into breakout rooms and dive into some of the barriers and solutions that we touched upon earlier in the presentation. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So just to provide a quick overview, in the breakout rooms, discuss solutions to the barriers identified in the Slido activity and explore community strengths across the county. In your groups, they may be a little bit smaller because we between 6 and 8 or 9 people. Each group will have a facilitator and a note taker, and we'll have actually, because of the question portion went a little longer, we are going to have 30 minutes to discuss in small groups, and then after we will regroup for a final activity. Next slide, please. So these are the questions that we will be presenting. How can the county support you in overcoming challenges to adopting sustainable practices, such as electrifying homes and businesses, reducing vehicle use, switching to electric vehicles? And then community benefits and strengths. What aspects of your community matter most to you? So next slide, we have some ground rules. Hannah, if you don't mind reviewing these while I set up the breakout rooms, that would be super helpful for me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
So folks are going to be put into rooms randomly. So hopefully you'll meet some new folks in the community. And so to make sure that we have a discussion that's productive, we ask that you please try to be here now, be present, allow for only one speaker at a time so that we can ensure we're collecting the feedback that you're providing. We ask that you step up to voice your thoughts if you're someone who doesn't always feel comfortable. We welcome you to contribute, and if you don't feel comfortable, you are welcome to provide your thoughts in the chat, and we'll be sure to take those from our note takers. We also ask that if you are someone who tends to speak up a lot, to maybe step back and let others chime in. And please try to be additive instead of repetitive, although we do encourage, if you are agreeing with someone else's point, please feel free to share that. We ask that you listen actively, trying to understand one another and keeping an open mind. And as Louise said, we're a little bit behind schedule, so if we can try to keep things on time, that would be helpful, because we do have a final activity when we come back around 7:30.
Awesome.
So
Thank
with
you.
that,
Thank
all
you,
set,
Hannah.
Louise?
Yes, I am ready
Yeah.
to go. So I will be opening up the rooms, and then your facilitator will be providing some more instructions. So thank you all, and we will get this started. Thank you. All right, welcome back, everyone. I think people are trickling in. And just a reminder, Spanish translation or Spanish interpretation services are still being provided. So please ensure that you are on the right channel. We are going to do a quick activity where we are going to continue to get some feedback and input from you all. So I am going to Hannah, do you mind sharing the link when you have a moment?
Absolutely.
Awesome. And if you can go to the next slide, I'll do a demonstration of what we are doing. So to provide you all with we have a pretty exciting activity that we're excited to share with you all. So as you all know, one of the main purposes of the Monterey County CAP is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. The county has set targets to meet by 2030, and there are a suite of actions that could be taken to achieve target reductions. To help explore these possibilities, we've created a climate action simulator activity. This interactive tool allows you to step into the role of a climate action planner, exploring different suites of actions to meet the county's greenhouse gas reduction goals. The county would like to understand your preferences of where we should focus time and resources to meet this 2030 target. So Hannah shared a link which will direct you to the exercise, and I am going to share my screen so I can walk us all through it. All right, so we are on the Conveo site at the moment. If you click here for Action Simulator, it will direct you to the exercise. So I'll provide some brief instructions to get everyone acquainted, and then I will let you all kind of submit it at your leisure. So you'll see 16 different climate actions, each with varying levels of impact. Some actions might lead to significant GHG reductions, while others may offer smaller but still valuable contributions. Your job is going to be to create a scenario that reaches the county's 2030 target of 100,000 points. where each point represents 1 metric ton of carbon reduced. So assigning more points to an action means achieving greater emission reductions. So you can see, you can slide it across and determine the emission reduction. But if you slide all the way to the end, you max out the emissions, that also means it requires more time and resources to implement. You'll need to stay within the 100,000 and 130,000 points when developing your scenario. So this means that you'll need to be strategic, considering ambition and feasibility. Please note that each action includes a read more option. And here you can learn exactly what different levels of efforts would look like in practice. And we even give examples of just to kind of visualize what the impact will be. Now, you won't be able to submit until you've reached the minimum target of 100,000 points. And you'll also be prevented from assigning more points once you've hit the maximum of 130,000 points. So once you're ready to submit, you scroll all the way to the bottom. And you can see these are all 16 actions. And you'll fill out this form and hit submit. And if you have additional questions, we do have, if you have additional ideas, you are more than welcome to share them in the form below. But we really want to make sure, we really want to hear from all of you, what you think Monterey County scenario should be. And this will definitely help inform our, the actions outlined in the draft cap. I want to make sure I'm not missing anything, Hannah.
Yeah, I think, Luis, if you're able to click on the read more, yeah, I think, read through this, and it provides a little bit more context so that you can understand kind of what different scales of points could mean. But this is the first time we're launching this, so we're really excited to, see how clear this is. We're welcoming any kind of feedback on this. So, we're hoping we can spend some time with you all testing this tool out and letting us know if you have any questions or concerns. So for Spanish speakers, Luis, there is an option to transition this to Spanish, and it should populate all of the text here in Spanish or whatever language you need.
Awesome. Well, with that, I will stop sharing my screen and hand it back over to you, Hannah, for the presentation sharing. Oops. And just kind of as a reminder, now that you've seen the platform or maybe you're logged on, maybe you're filling it out right now. Again, it's to create a scenario that meets the 2030 target by selecting a combination of different actions and adjusting the points for each. Again, you must spend between 100,000 and 130,000 points. There are more than 130,000 points, so you do have to kind of make some choices. The more points you spend on an action, the more greenhouse gas emissions will be reduced. This also means more resources will be needed to implement the actions. Click the read more under each action to understand how the points relate to various levels of actions. And also note that not all actions are created equal. Some are worth 30,000 points and others are worth less than 100. And, we covered some of the ones today, some of the 3 opportunities. Those are going to have the largest impact. But you'll see different levels of points across each action. So yeah, we're very excited to share this with you all. I am seeing some questions about the. I do see questions saying I'm not sure if there are enough points available. There are points available. I will say that it is challenging to meet the goal because so definitely as you go through, you will find that you will be able to reach 100,000 points. However, there will be some decisions and trade-offs that will need to be made in order to do that. And I know, Hannah, we have additional engagement opportunities next. Do we want to jump into those? Or do we want to leave some
Sure.
time for just to continue reviewing the exercise?
I think we can keep moving, and then for folks that do still have questions on the tool, we're happy to hang on the line for a little bit longer if we can continue the conversation. So here you go, Luis.
So Cora, is that
Oh,
you?
is that going back to Cora?
Back to
I can-
Cora.
Go ahead and take this one. So just some additional engagement opportunities. So this climate action simulator tool will stay live and available until January 6th of 2025. So we hope that this provides some value and is able to be an interactive way of seeing which strategies the community is looking for. There's also that barrier survey that Hannah mentioned earlier available on the website, and that will be available until January 6th as well. And then just for our next steps, there are these two actions we talked about, the barrier survey and the climate action simulator. Any feedback and other written comments that you would like to send to the program, please feel free to email us. We can put the climate email in the chat. There's going to be an Alternative Energy and Environment Committee on December 17th, and that will be to discuss the greenhouse gas inventory update that was postponed from a previous meeting due to some scheduling issues. And the draft cap will be available for review in the winter. Again, we're hoping to get that out sometime in January, and there will be a 60-day comment period where you will be able to add your comments directly into the PDF document that is live on our project website. So that will be available for 60 days, and that's where we can get a lot of good comments. And if there's additional room for engagement, or if you'd like to have conversations with the sustainability program, then please reach out to me. And with that, thank you all very much for coming today. I hopped around and was able to hear a lot of really good conversations, and it was great to see that today.